Thank you very much. I am very pleased and very honored to be here this morning with all of you. And I'm very grateful to Samir Saran and his great team at ORF for making this possible. It's undoubtedly a very important topic, the one that we're discussing today, and I think some of the statements that we heard this morning make that very, very clear. The need to have, as the title of this conference says it itself, nature-based solutions is an imperative for all of us for mitigation and adaptation to climate change and to preserve biodiversity. I want to focus my words this morning on the experience that we've had in Mexico in a couple of these issues, which I think will be useful for you to know, but also because I think that Mexico shares with India in general and with this part of India, the Northeast in particular, many similarities in terms of the social structure, our economic structure, but also in terms of the natural habitat where we are. So I think that some of the things that we are doing and that we have done in my country can be best practices that can be replicated in this part of the world. Let me say, first of all, that a large sector of the Mexican economy and our population depend on agriculture and natural resources such as forests and jungles. Agriculture contributes 3% to the national GDP of Mexico, and about 20% of the overall population of Mexico lives in rural areas. Secondly, due to climate change, and these are the negative effects of climate change, there's been a decrease of arable lands, and agricultural yields are projected to reduce in the coming year, which of course makes it more difficult to reduce poverty and tackle the loss of biodiversity, which are two very important goals of my government and certainly I think of every country. Thirdly, the yield of main crops in Mexico, such as corn, sugarcane, sorghum, wheat, rice, and soybeans, because of this phenomenon, could be reduced between 5 and 20% in the next 2 decades, and up to 80% by the end of the century, due to the present trends in climate change. There's going to be a panel this morning that is going to talk precisely about climate-smart agriculture, and I just want to say in that regard that international cooperation for enhancing climate-smart agriculture is certainly one of the key avenues that we have of action. Agreements such as the SDGs and the Paris Agreement are useful tools to implement climate-resilient practices. In the G20 framework, under the Indian presidency, the outcome document of the Agricultural Working Group, which just took place about 10 days ago in the city of Hyderabad, included a climate-smart approach for achieving a sustainable agricultural industry. Fourth, again coming back to Mexico, we are the fifth largest mega-diverse country in the world, possessing a great diversity of animals and plants. We have almost 70% of the global diversity of species, considering the best-known groups such as amphibians, reptiles, birds, mammals, and vegetation. And we rank 5th in variety of plants and amphibians, 3rd in mammals, and 2nd in reptiles in the entire planet. And therefore, it is not only our concern, but our responsibility to protect this environment. Finally, Mexico has coastlines both in the Atlantic and in the Pacific, and is located in a unique geographical location, which is the Tropic of Cancer, similar to India, where the greatest diversity of species occurs. Summing it all up, Mexico is fortunate to have a unique ecosystem that ranges from mangroves to estuaries, coastal lagoons to coral reefs, and much more. Now, considering these points and to tackle climate change, in November 2022, that is last year, our then Minister of Foreign Affairs announced at the COP27 in Egypt a series of important action steps to address the climate crisis. Let me stress that some of these actions are going to be taken together with the United States, given that both Mexico and the United States share, to a large extent, a common ecosystem. Very similar to what the Chief Minister was telling us just now. The political borders obviously do not recognize the ecosystem, and when one thinks of measures that could be taken here in the northeast of India, one has to include the neighboring countries as an integral approach. In these commitments that were taken last year, both countries, Mexico and the US, affirmed commitment to limit global warming to 1.5 degrees Celsius. We also both agreed to achieve net zero greenhouse emissions by 2050. And in the specific case of Mexico, we're going to deploy more than 30 additional gigawatts of combined wind, solar, geothermal, and hydroelectric capacity by the year 2030, reaching more than 40 gigawatts of combined wind and solar power. At a domestic level, Mexico has developed a solid institutional framework to face climate change and increase its resilience. Here are some of the most relevant ones. Number one, there was a general law on climate change that was adopted in 2012 and updated in 2018, which guarantees the right to a healthy environment, regulates actions for mitigation and adaptation to climate change, promotes education, research, development, and transfer of technology and innovation, dissemination in matters of adaptation and mitigation to climate change. Two, a special climate change program, a national climate change strategy, has been adopted, framed in the general law on climate change. Three, an environment and natural resources sector program, an agriculture and rural development sector program, and a national water program have been adopted, all cross-cutting strategic axes linked to mitigation and adaptation actions in ecosystems and productive sectors. Four, a national system on climate change integrated by each state government, local authorities, and the Mexican Congress. To advance its objectives, it has instruments such as the Council on Climate Change, an Intersectorial Commission of Climate Change, a National Institute of Ecology and Climate Change, and an evaluation coordination. Five, we have a federal system of protected natural areas, which covers 90 million hectares, which represents about 33% of Mexico's land and marine territory. And finally, six, a National Commission of Protected Natural Areas in charge of managing and conserving 182 sites where life processes are sustained and perpetuated to ensure the future well-being of natural species in Mexico. Let me address one issue which I think is of particular importance, certainly to Mexico, but it's also, I think it's something that will be of interest to this part of India as it continues to develop and it continues to attract people to come and admire and share and enjoy the beauty of Meghalaya and the Northeast, and that is the issue of tourism. I think it's a very good case study in the issue of nature-based solutions. Mexico has become, in the past few years, the third most visited country in the world. The income of tourism generated, both national and foreign tourism, is approximately 7.5% of our national GDP, 9% of national employment, which gives you an idea of the importance of this sector in the Mexican economy and for development purposes. And we're also the seventh country with the highest number of UNESCO World Heritage Sites, just after India. Therefore, Mexico has adapted its tourism to become more attractive, but also considering economic and social factors, in particular with great regard to the conservation of the natural habitat. In this regard, we've had a policy of green tourism, which categorizes and puts together not only the issue of green tourism itself, but ecotourism and rural tourism. Through our Ministry of Tourism, we have established a program which includes as a priority objective to promote sustainable tourism in the national territory of Mexico. An important challenge to promote this type of sustainable tourism is the correlation between the size of the destination measured by the arrival of tourists and the volume of waste residues. A new tourism model will be a sign of unrestricted respect for the environment and the rational use of natural, cultural, and biocultural resources to guarantee the interest and heritage of future generations in absolute compliance with human rights. As part of our adherence to the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development, we have also launched a strategy called Mexico is Reborn Sustainable. It aims to create a new generation of tourist circuits for social well-being, harmony with nature, and the integral development of localities for the creation of sustainable destinations. And some of these examples on ideas of conservation, which I think are useful to know, are, for example, the preservation of biosphere reserves, of which Mexico has a few, and some of them are in the World Heritage lists of UNESCO, experiential education and biocultural environment. We also have a program called Adaptur, Tourism Adaptation, which consists in the implementation of adaptation measures to climate change based on ecosystems. Just last week, this program was recognized in the Goa roadmap that was adopted by the Tourism Working Group of the G20. I think these measures are, as I said, good examples of some practices that can and probably should be taken precisely to preserve the environment, to recognize that when we talk about nature solves, there are issues that we can all do, that governments can take precisely to protect our common heritage, which is the world that we live in. Thank you very much.